Perennial election loser Kari Lake is back to doing what she does best. She's not good at winning elections, but she's good at blaming other people when she loses an election. And she's doing it again. This time she's pointing the finger at Mitch McConnell and saying that it was a whole sabotage in Arizona from the Republican Party. I want to play the clip for you. It's very short, but I also want to try to contrast the wrong way to lose an election with the right way to lose an election. And I'm trying to lose an election the right way. If you look yesterday at my breakdown of this interview on Pod Save America with three of the campaign people from Kamala Harris's team, I'm trying to just say, we lost, let's learn, rather than saying this person rigged it and that person sabotaged me. And so we're going to try to do it a little bit differently. Let's start with Kari Lake talking to Steve Bannon and blaming everybody other than herself.
And Mitch McConnell didn't want you because Stephen Law and Mitch McConnell, here's how much money they gave you, ma'am. Zero. Against $80 million coming through the Democrats, you didn't get a penny. That is a seat we could have won, and they would rather have 53 seats and no Kari Lake than having 54 with Kari Lake, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, and we worked hard to try to make up some of that. We could have used the help. We could have used, I think they have a war chest of, I've heard, $400 million to help get the Senate majority. And I think I was hoping that we would eventually get some of that money. I know they were spending it in places like Maryland, where it was a blowout defeat of the Republican running, Larry Hogan. And unfortunately, we didn't get any money. They didn't give Blake Masters any money in the last go around as well. And so, I mean, it is what it is, and we can't go back in time. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah. So she has now lost the Arizona gubernatorial race last cycle. She's now lost her U.S. Senate race as well, both in Arizona. And she has blamed election fraud. She has blamed cured or uncured ballots. She's blamed deep fried ballots, sauteed ballots. You know, it's McConnell, and then this Republican fund didn't give me money. And what happened in November is really simple. About close to 200,000 Republican Trump voters who went out to vote for Trump looked at their ballots and said yes to Trump, no to Kari Lake. That's it. That's the explanation for why Kari Lake lost. There were voters in Arizona who voted for Trump and made it crystal clear. While we are on board for Trump over Harris, we are not on board with Kari Lake. It's a bridge too far. We're not going to do it. And that's why she lost. You don't get to, well, you can, but it's not logical to say that here is the list of 10 reasons I lost, and none of them apply to Donald Trump, who was a fellow Republican on the exact same ticket. There were hundreds of thousands of Arizona Trump voters who went out of their way not to vote for Kari Lake despite filling out their ballot. Kari Lake's entire campaign was built on grievance politics, conspiracy theories, loyalty tests, of course, but there's a limit to how much chaos even Trump supporters are willing to stomach. And to some degree, even though Trump's a loser from 2020 and they still voted for him, more recently, Kari Lake just lost in Arizona, still hasn't just straight up said, I was defeated. It's, well, we didn't get the votes because of this judge and that rigging and these. But she very recently, 2 years prior, she lost and still hasn't just acknowledged I lost. And a bunch of the Trump voters weren't willing to stomach it. They didn't need Mitch McConnell to convince them. They didn't need Republican Senate campaign money. Kari Lake alienated the voters all by herself. And instead of learning from her loss, she's doubling down. It's the GOP establishment. It's the media. It's the vote counters. It's the vote printers. The one person she won't blame is herself. You know what? It wasn't a turnout issue. Enough Republicans came out that I could have won. How do I know that? Because they voted for Trump. They didn't vote for me. I need to look at myself. Laughable. They never admit fault. It's always about who else can I blame, fraud or Mitch McConnell's fault or whatever. Her problem's not Mitch McConnell or the media or any of it. It's Kari Lake. Here is where I want the left to go at this in a different manner. And this is why yesterday we took more than 15 minutes to just really think through some of the different explanations as to why Kamala Harris lost. And of course, Democrats also losing in the Senate, Democrats losing in the House. You can't possibly, I say often, you can't fix the problem unless you diagnose it. Kari Lake didn't diagnose it in 2022, or she misdiagnosed it as fraud and other things. And so what happened? She lost again. Now, that doesn't always happen, right? I mean, Trump misdiagnosed it in 2020, saying he really won. He didn't. 2024, he genuinely did win, but it's not always going to work for you. And so what we need to just think about is if your reflex is now to go to Kamala lost because of fraud, or this other obscure thing having to do with how ballots are counted or processed in Pennsylvania, or let's just remember, you can't fix the problem. You usually can't fix the problem unless it's by some random chance if you misdiagnose it. And as we start to think about 2026 and 2028, and what needs to happen in terms of the people that are on the ticket and the people that are behind the scenes and the approach and the message and the policy, there's not one simple answer in a country of 340 million people where the election has so many voters, but such a small margin. And so our first instinct should be take a lesson from Kari Lake. In 2022, it was fraud. In 2024, it was Mitch McConnell. Rarely is there one reason or one explanation. You think back to 2016. There were some who said Hillary lost because she didn't visit the critical battleground states in those last 10 to 14 days. Could that have been a factor? Yes. Is that the reason why Hillary Clinton lost? No. Others said the reason Hillary Clinton lost is James Comey, out of the blue, did a second press conference to talk about how there would not be charges against Hillary, but how there is an investigation, et cetera. That hurt her. It probably did hurt her. But is that the reason Hillary Clinton lost in 2016? I don't think so. The point is, anybody giving you one explanation, you should be skeptical of. Secondly, if there is going to be a different result in 2026 and in 2028 than there was in 2024, something has to change unless you are counting only on your opponent failing. Now, this is interesting to think about because Trump's 2024 campaign was essentially the same campaign as 2020. It was the same threats about a depression, a stock market crash, all this stuff. It was bogus in 2020, bogus in 2024. It was the same half-baked economic promises based on a very limited understanding of how anything works. It didn't work in 2020. It worked in 2024. You can't assume that doing the same thing is going to work because it often doesn't. For Trump, it did for reasons that are very specific. Despite pretty good economic numbers, enough voters just didn't see it that way. Well, that's what matters. It matters how voters see it. Harris, seen as an extension of the Biden presidency, didn't help. So many errors were made by the Democratic Party that for Trump, it worked out that doing the same thing he did in 2020 got him elected. Doing the same thing he did in 2020 as he did in 2016 didn't win. So the takeaway should be you probably want to take the reins of this thing and not just plan to repeat the exact same playbook. Does that mean a different candidate in 2028? Absolutely. I see people talking about Kamala Harris. I think it's mostly a name recognition thing right now. I don't think Kamala Harris should be the nominee in 2028. Is a different campaign approach necessary? 1,000%. It wasn't not doing the Rogan interview that hurt the campaign irreparably, but it was the totality of the media strategy, the lack of a left-wing independent media ecosystem, the way the right has. It's a whole bunch of different things. What about policy? Harris ran to Biden's right. That doesn't seem to have been a particularly effective approach. So a lot of things need to change. But let's not be like Kari Lake. Let's not be like these people. Well, I wrote a book After a long journey and a ton of work, I am really thrilled with how it turned out, and I hope you'll read it. The book is called The Echo Machine, and in a nutshell, it looks at how American politics got so broken, who has already figured out solutions, and how we can try to fix it and stop the terror of Trump for the next 4 years. With Trump winning this election, The Echo Machine couldn't be more relevant, not only a warning about how we got here, but also about what might be coming and how to prevent the worst outcomes. We've got to stay engaged. We need a plan, and that's what the book is about. There's a belief out there that unless you have corporate media behind you, you can't have a successful political book launch, that it's not possible. I think we can prove that wrong. Order The Echo Machine today at davidpakman.com/echo on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Audible, Kindle, anywhere that books, ebooks, and audiobooks are sold. You can also call any local bookstore and say, please order me The Echo Machine by David Pakman. Wherever you get the book, you'll get the free pre-order perks, including the signed book plate. Head to davidpakman.com/free book stuff after ordering.